All right, I'm here. Candace will be off the phone in a second. What can I help you with respect to contracts? What contracts would you like to focus on today? The point of today is uh, helping you get some clarity around contracts in general, whether it's writing them, organizing them, negotiating them. What what should we start with?
Is it just
Yeah,
is it just,
John's here too.
yeah.
I don't know. I haven't really had to write a contract, so I don't know what I would need help with.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I've written a couple and they've worked out okay. So really just kind of seeing what other people are, coming up against and getting some tips.
Okay. Um, okay, let's start with basically how to put them together just briefly. So let's get the basics figured out. You guys have both joined boards, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you've got your what do you call it? Your nerds number, and you've gotten DocuSign integrated with Command, right?
Right.
Okay, so have you gone in and played around with the contracts at all? Have you like tried to identify the buyer brokerage agreement or the listing agreement? Like have you like dragged that into a what do you call it, into a live doc, into a live opportunity? Have you kind of played around with that at all?
For the BBA, yes.
Okay, perfect. So what would be, let's see, I can go in so many different directions. Let's start with the buyer. Okay, let's chat for a second about what actually is an offer, right? What is an offer composed of? Okay. We're starting kind of at the very beginning for a second, Candace, to do just making sure that we know exactly what is composed of an offer. So an offer is first of all, the BBA should be signed as soon as you're prepared to get a commitment, right? The second they appear to be ready to commit, we want to give them a BBA unless we've already had that conversation earlier. Typically, what I would do is at the end of the buyer consultation, I would ask if they're prepared to move forward. Okay, if they're prepared to move forward, then I would hand them a BBA and I would expect them to sign it. At the very least, I would expect them to take it and tell me that they're going to review it and sign it later. Okay, but it's not going to be a very high pressure situation. It's basically a conversation like, this is a document called the buyer brokerage agreement. This creates a client relationship between myself and by you. It can be terminated at any time by either party. There's no penalty. And the idea is, in license law today, you are my customer, meaning according to license law, as you guys probably remember, I'm really only supposed to do ministerial tasks for you, which I was always taught that ministerial tasks is essentially things that you could do yourself, right? It's using your hands and your feet. It's like, what school district is this in? How many bedrooms does it have? What was it last sold for? Public record type stuff, right? How much acreage is it on? That kind of thing. How long has it been on the market? These kind of questions. If you want me to use my brain, meaning if you want to talk strategy, if you want to crunch the numbers, if you want to talk, kind of putting together the offer, we really should have a client relationship. This is the document that creates that client relationship. Okay. So I don't expect you to sign it. Nobody's gonna like, I've never been a fan of this idea of like, oh, well, I'm not going to show you anything until you sign a buyer brokerage agreement. Well, here's the thing. Like, you're not going to marry anybody you never gone on a date with. Okay. So like, if I don't know what it's like to work together, then I'm not going to commit myself to working with you. Right. I want to see what that experience is like. I want to make sure that you're what I think you are before I commit to working with you. So I get it. If you don't want to sign it today, it's totally fine. My job is to earn your business, right? And if you don't already know what it means to earn their business, now's a really good time to ask, right? How do I win with you? How do I lose with you? If I have sensitive information to share, how would you like me to share it, right? If you have sensitive information to share with me, this is how I'd like you to share it with me, right? What are some of the positive experiences you've had with agents in the past? What are some of the negative experiences you've had with agents in the past, right? Candace, you probably heard half of those questions during our courtship, right? I mean, we're trying to figure out if we're a match, right? If we're not a match, then what are we doing here, right? We're wasting each other's time. Okay, so we're trying to figure out how to serve them. If they're like, hey, the thing that I disliked about my last agent is he always texted me and I want to be emailed. Okay, listen up. They're telling you how to serve them. The minute you send them a text, you're showing you're not paying attention. Make sense? It's a lack of respect, quite frankly, right? So if you don't have a clear understanding about how to service your client, that's a great place to start. Let's figure out how to do that first, okay? So the buyer brokerage agreement is handled just between you and the buyer, and that's kind of put off to the side. Nobody else needs to see that except for the brokerage, right? The seller doesn't need to see it. It's none of anyone's business, okay? That's not part of the offer, part of the contract. That's just a private contract between the two of you. Hang on 2 seconds, okay? Just 2 seconds. Sorry, I forgot I started a coffee before this thing started, and I'm like, where's my coffee at? Okay. All right, guys. Now here, you got to turn on your videos so this can like maybe be like the first group session we've ever had where everyone's got their video on. That would be awesome. Okay. John, you've been with us long enough to know how funny that is, right?
I can appreciate that. Absolutely.
Okay. We're having some fun. It's late in the afternoon, right? Okay. Here's the rest of the offer. Okay. We need a pre-approval letter or pre-qualification letter, ideally a pre-approval letter. Okay. When we are in courtship with the buyer, part of our qualification process of the buyer is making sure that we know how this person's going to put it together, right? Are they buying the home with cash? Are you getting a loan? What type of loan are you getting? Etc. Okay, we do have alliance partnerships with Shelter Mortgage, but hopefully you guys all know that we're not required to use them, right? If you think they're awesome and you think they support us, you got no idea what they're doing behind the scenes. Okay, they are champions for you guys, just so you know. They are incredibly generous. So I'm just gonna kindly ask, hey, give them a shot, okay? But you're not under any circumstances required to use them as a mortgage partner, okay? If given the opportunity to make recommendations to your prospects, I always recommending more than one lender, so that they don't think you're saying, oh, well, you got to work with this guy because I'm going to get a kickback or something like that. Kickbacks are illegal. It's not what I'm saying, okay? So, in a perfect world, I don't want to turn this into a financing contingency discussion, but I believe it's very important to understand what type of financing your client is getting and to make sure that they understand all the costs and fees associated. So I really like working with lenders that will provide what oftentimes is called a loan worksheet. A loan worksheet is basically they used to call it a good faith estimate. And it is basically a list of all the estimated closing costs and fees associated with getting the mortgage and closing on the property, closing costs, escrows, that kind of thing. Because if the buyer goes to a home, it's a good chance they're going to like the home and we want to take action immediately. I need to know if they're getting financing, how to even write up the offer, right? Is it FHA? Is it VA? Is it USDA? Is it conventional? Is it cash? What's the closing cost that you're going to be expected to pay? And if you can't pay them for cash, I need to know how much to ask for, right? So there's a lot of organization that you have to do behind the scenes to make sure that you're prepared to put an offer out there. Make sense? The structure of an offer is as follows, okay? The pre-approval letter, okay, that's the first piece. The second piece is the purchase and sale, okay, the purchase and sale agreement. The next piece is the financing, I'll call it the financing document, okay? There's generally going to be a financing document of some sort in the contract. And that would include one of the following things: either an FHA loan exhibit, a conventional loan exhibit, a USDA loan exhibit, a VA loan exhibit, depending on which type of loan they get, or a all cash exhibit. It's probably going to be one. I mean, there's really no other way to do it. It's going to be one of those 4 or 5. Okay. So pre-approval letter, purchase and sale, the financing document, and then all the disclosures. So typically with a regular old property, you're going to have a seller's property disclosure statement. If the home was built prior to 1978, you'll have a lead-based paint disclosure statement. And if the home is in a community with rules and regulations and bylaws and HOAs and fees and that kind of thing, there'll be a document called the Community Association Disclosure. Okay. It is ideally the seller's job or the listing agent's job to make sure that those documents are completed and shared when requested. Sometimes they put them on the FMLS and you can download them from the FMLS and you get your client to sign them. Or sometimes you just have to ask the listing agent, hey, Joe, can you send me the seller's disclosure statement for 123 Hill Street? The truth is I tended to not put them online. The reason I didn't want to put them online is because I wanted to talk to the people. Now, if I'm going to get 50 offers, I'll just put them online because I don't want to have 50 different conversations. But if back in the day, there wasn't this type of environment, and if somebody was interested in making an offer, I wanted to hear their voice because I can hear what they're not saying, if that makes sense. Right? I've studied language and studied people enough to be able to know what kind of like their level of like anxiety or nervousness or comfort or confidence, or I can tell a lot of that stuff from somebody's voice and the way they're behaving. And therefore I want them to call me and say, hey, Bill, you're listing in Smyrna at Hill Street. I want a disclosure statement. Oh yeah, that's a real popular property. What's your favorite part? Right? Or hang on one second, let me grab a sheet of paper, I'll record your email. By the way, tell me about your buyer, or, how soon does your buyer want to buy, or, something of that nature, right? Do you guys have any questions? Obviously, you got to be really careful, with respect to protected classes, and you're not really supposed to ask questions about somebody's, sex or race or familial status. Hey, are they single? Are they married? Do they have kids? Are they white, black, orange, gray? You're not supposed to ask any of those questions. You can get in a lot of trouble for that. Okay. Not to mention the fact that it's irrelevant. Right.
Can I just ask a quick question, Bill?
Yeah.
About I noticed that the all cash contingency does provide a box where the buyer can choose to finance the property or choose to take out a mortgage on the property. When would you do that? I mean, or as a when do you decide to go all cash or have a mortgage? When do you when does the buyer have to make that decision? When does the seller make that decision as far as accepting the offer? Because I noticed
I'm
that
not even positive that's true. Are you
it's
sure?
it's in the first box on box 1A of the all cash agreement. It says something to the effect that although this person does have all the cash for this, they still reserve the right to take out a mortgage on the property, or have a mortgage on the property with the deed as collateral, or something to that effect.
Okay, let me address one thing which you're not saying that I want to make sure we clear up, which is if the person is buying the home or intends to buy the home cash,
right?
So here are the way that things are paired. You either have a pre-approval letter if you have a financing document. You have proof of funds if you have cash. If you have the cash exhibit. Okay. Proof of funds is essentially the cash version of pre-qualification. And that is, here's an account statement from, Fidelity or whatever that says I've got, $600,000 in this account, and that's going to be the source of the down payment or source of the purchase price. I kind of want to read that exactly.
Yeah, I'm calling it up
But,
also as we're
what
because
I- what I-
because I'm in a situation where I'm in a offer situation where one of the other offers they put in an all cash exhibit, but they're not a contingency, but they actually may end up financing a portion of the purchase price.
Candace, you're more than welcome to chime in while I look this up. My experience, or it's my understanding that if you put that you're an all cash buyer, right? If meaning you're free to get a mortgage. I mean, no one's stopping you from that, but you absolutely are not protected in terms of your earnest money, or like if the seller is going to be asked to like delay closing or something because of last minute trying to deal with an appraisal or something like that, you pretty much forget about them being cooperative. The only other issue there is one of the primary benefits outside of no appraisal and of a cash buyer, and a cash buyer could get an appraisal, by the way, is quick close, right? So
Right.
generally you find that a cash closing could be anywhere in like the 2 to 3 week neighborhood, which would be really, really, really pushing it for a mortgage.
Right.
So if you're going to turn around and say you're all cash and then try to flip a mortgage within the time period that normally would be reserved for just cash, you're going to run into problems.
Not easy. Yeah, it says while buyer has sufficient liquid assets to purchase the property in this transaction for all cash, buyer reserves the right to pay all or a portion of the purchase price by obtaining an institutional first mortgage secured by a deed to secure debt on the property.
Yeah, all that means is basically, I'll tell you I'm getting cash, and here's the proof of funds to show that I've got it. Yet you and I both understand that I do have the ability to get a loan if I so choose. However,
Okay.
if you were to get a loan and you were to basically be forthright about the fact that my intention is to get a loan, then you have a series of protections like an appraisal contingency, a financing contingency. If you go about it the other way, then you don't have those protections. Like,
Okay.
I'll give you an example. Like, I don't know, we're trying to resolve this behind the scenes. It just popped up last night, so I don't know exactly how we're going to deal with this. Pam's dealing with it, but we have a listing, and the buyer, some of their funds for the down payment, or more or less all their funds from the down payment, are in Robinhood. The stock app or whatever.
Sure, the stock app. Yeah,
That's
stock
under
trading
all-
app.
That's all under all this, examination because of GameStop and
Sure.
shorting and all that kind of craziness. So we're having a hard time getting an account statement letter, and we're also having a hard time making it possible for him to withdraw the money.
Yeah, you might be able to. Yeah, exactly. Might be
So,
delayed withdrawing. Yep.
Everything seemed like it was going fine until it's not,
It's not going fine.
right? Now, that's not something that like Pam could have prevented or I could have prevented,
Sure.
right? It just, sometimes little things like this pop up, and we have to like keep our cool and work through it.
Okay.
Candace, have you ever had that type of issue?
No, I've had issues where people had their money overseas and they didn't want to pay taxes, but they had to get them here in order to buy what they wanted to buy. So that's a
Okay.
process.
So in other words, so the all cash contingency, you would never. I mean, you reserve the right, but you reserve the right, but you would never exercise that right. If you put an all cash contingency, you're paying cash.
I don't know that I would agree
Oh.
with that completely. I mean,
Okay.
that would be my common assumption.
Okay.
But it is important that the seller understands that they do reserve the right to get a loan. However, again, the biggest issue you're going to come up with is timing,
Timing.
right? And by the way, if I'm a seller or I'm representing a seller and they're an all cash buyer and I choose them because they're all cash, and then they turn around and start messing with me about loans and delays and all that,
Yeah.
I'm going to tell them to go to hell, and I'm going to keep their earnest money and I'm going to go sell it to somebody else.
Okay.
Too.
That's what okay. Thank you. Sorry to get in the weeds with that. Just okay.
No problem. No problem.
Okay, cool.
And so we want to make sure that the disclosures are in place. So let's review the disclosures one more time. If the home was built prior to the 1978, lead-based paint disclosure. If it's a condominium, there's a special seller's property disclosure for that. in a community association disclosure statement if it's in a community with rules and regulations and bylaws and stuff. Okay, and I'm going to say something that I know is controversial. I'm pretty sure Melba would disagree with me. It wouldn't be the first time. It's okay. Okay. I believe that when we are the buyer's agent, it is our job, and as the seller's agent, to be honest, it's our job to make sure that those disclosure statements read the way they're supposed to read. What I mean by that is if the disclosure statement comes back and the seller forgot to check that the landscape lights are included, or that the switch plate lights are, covers are included, or they have let's say they have a really crappy explanation for a repair, right? Like basement flooded, we fixed it. And that's not very thorough. I would prefer to see basement flooded, insurance company was contacted immediately, professional remediation was done immediately, all receipts and proof of work are available for review if you would like, and we've had no problems since. That gives me a little bit more comfort. Does that make sense? I'm obviously not saying to lie, but my God, give them a little bit more comfort, right? That's like saying, hey, basement flooded. My Uncle Joe, who's a painter, said he knew how to fix it. It seems to be okay. Like, how reassuring is that? You see what I'm saying? Okay, and by the way, if there's not landscape lights included and these kind of things, like it just, like if I'm on the buyer side of that, I want the disclosure statement to look sharp. So I might want them to check that, and it's tough to bring up, and it could cause conflict with when the signatures happen and deadlines and all this. So just make it tight at the beginning, okay? If I share a sloppy property disclosure statement, right, then the buyer thinks my client's sloppy. Okay, do you think sloppy people service their HVAC systems twice a year? Do you think they caulk and paint every time they should? You see what I'm saying? Do you think they clean out their dryer vents when they should? I don't want to see sloppy, okay? And maybe they bought the home 10 years ago, and 10 years ago there wasn't a transfer fee for the HOA, but now there is. And so they write one down that says, hey, 0 on the transfer fee. I don't know about that. Give me the person's name. I will call them myself and verify what it is. Because if there's a transfer fee, you're in charge of paying for it if you don't disclose it, Mr. Seller. And I don't want to have a discussion with you at the closing table about whether I'm going to participate, because I will not be participating. You see what I'm saying? So I'm going to get all that stuff figured out on the front end. Say, hey, I heard that the fee is $260, not $250. I'm sending it back over for a new signature. You see what I'm saying? So yes, it is the responsibility of the seller to complete it, but it's my responsibility to make sure it shows the way I want it to see. Make sense? Candace, you think I'm crazy?
It's buyer due diligence. And you don't just accept everything that is written there, especially if it's done. Sorry, I've got some background. Especially if it's done sloppily. The other thing I would say is one of the very best things that can happen is if a buyer has been diligent about a seller has been diligent about their home care, and they have a book with receipts in it from all the work that they've done. That just is, to have that out on a table where people can flip through is just such a comfort for buyers.
Right. And I'll tell you, like, have you guys ever looked at a home and like you go down to the HVAC and they're like, the little stamp that they have, like serviced, February of 2020, November of 2020, February of 2019, November of 2019. Like, and it's all in neat handwriting and you're like, ooh, man, I love this person, right? Or you go into the house and like everything is perfectly organized and placed. And you're like, this is the kind of seller that when something's leaking, they fix it, right? This is the type of seller that does the right thing. Right? If I go into somebody's house and it's all sloppy and there's leaks and wood rot and all this kind of stuff, I'm like, what am I not seeing? Like, this is the stuff that I can see. I think I should be worried about the things I can't see. Right? And it's no judgment on them, but let's make a little bit of judgment. Okay. If that's the way they keep their home, number one, it's only because of a couple reasons. Either they don't care, which is not a good sign for a buyer, or they ran out of money. And that's also potentially not a great sign for a buyer, right? Because what else did they run out of money and weren't able to deal with, right? Does that make sense? I know I'm getting close to the borderline here, but that's the truth, right? You're going to be buying somebody else's project, if you will. You follow me?
Yeah, I don't see the issue with that, Bill. I think you're fine. We had a situation in with like what's included in the house, and they checked light fixtures, but they didn't check ceiling fans, which have the light fixtures in them. And I contacted the agent and I said, do the ceiling fans? And she says, oh, light fixtures cover everything. Yeah, just so I put a stipulation that the ceiling fans need to be included in the property.
That's right. This wasn't me personally,
like
but I know of somebody who was selling. Let me think of what this was. No, buying a multi-million-dollar home, and the seller's disclosure did not check that the light bulbs and the switch plate covers would be included in the sale, and the negotiations went really bad. What's up, Mel? Right, and they went south. And the seller says, well, I'm just going to take all the light bulbs and all the switch plate covers out of the house before I leave. And in a 10,000 square foot house, that's a lot of money of light bulbs, right? Damn, a light bulb's like $4 these days, right? It's just it's like child's games, but sometimes that's the way, that's why we have contracts and they're supposed to be buttoned up to avoid situations like that.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And the worst thing would be for my client to walk into that house and all the ceiling fans are gone. You never
Yeah,
know.
because you'll be there within an hour on a ladder fixing it
Yeah,
right
I'll
after you
be-
got
I'll
back
be-
from Home Depot.
I'll be at Home Depot buying 8 or 9 ceiling fans. Exactly.
That's right, because our job is to make sure the experience goes flawlessly. And if the experience is not going flawlessly, then
It's on
there's
me.
only one person around to fix it, right? Because you could have been the best agent in the whole universe and something happens at the very end, you know, so that their experiences has not met that person's expectations, and that's the energy that they take away from your experience together, right? And then you don't get any referrals and you don't get the call back, and you pass by the home in 5 years and somebody else's signs in the yard. You follow me? That's not fun. Okay, so that's what makes an offer. Okay, now what I would recommend is I'm going to make a little list of, I'll type it in the chat just to make sure that everyone can access it. Okay, purchase and sale, FHA loan exhibit, conventional loan exhibit, VA loan exhibit, seller's property disclosure statement, community association disclosure, buyer brokerage agreement. There's a new line for the seller listing agreement. I think it's called exclusive seller. I think it might say engagement now. Listing agreement. Okay, these are the most common documents, and you should be able to explain these documents backward and forward. Okay, and then I'd put in the all cash too. If you go onto our YouTube page, you will see explanations on all of these documents. Okay, you will see explanations on how to find them in DocuSign, how to add signatures, initials, how to explain them, what the most common ways of completing them are, right? With the typical numbers that you put in, with days of due diligence and financing contingencies, special stipulations, all kinds of stuff like that. Okay. So if you have not familiarized yourself with each of these contracts, this is a great place to start. Okay. Candace, have you ever had a real estate closing without having to deal with contracts on that file? Ever?
Never,
Neither have I.
never.
Neither have I. So the only way you're going to get paid, guys, is to navigate these contracts. Okay, so I would take one by one, I'd print them all off, I'd read them through. I would highlight anything you're confused about, or you want another explanation about, or you need clarity on. I'd go to the video and see if that question is answered. I'd pop into the YouTube or the chat and see if Candace or myself or any of your other peers are able to answer that question. Candace and I have done I think a pretty good job of being responsive over the last, really since the beginning, with your questions, and giving you ideas and telling you what makes sense and what doesn't make sense and all that. And we can help make sure that you have everything completed properly. Make sense? Okay, what kind of questions do we have? Well, let's go back. Chantrell, was that kind of what you were expecting? Is there something specifically that we didn't cover?
No, this is great. I'm gonna do as you said, go back and pull all of these and read over them.
Yeah.
I haven't had to. So this
Well,
will be
let me give you some advice.
okay.
It's a lot less stressful to study them when you don't have to than when you do have to. Okay.
It's same for lease rentals as well.
There are leasing contracts as well. So you could look under lease agreement, the GAR rental application. These are some others, rental application. And then there's something called exclusive tenant brokerage agreement. It's kind of like a buyer brokerage, but for a tenant. It's basically connecting the two of you in a client relationship. Okay, so those are the contracts that I would recommend that you become very, very familiar with. Okay, Candace, did I leave anything out in your opinion?
Hey, Bill, I got questions.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Hang on, before we go there, Candace, did I leave anything out, you think?
Not that I can think of. You've got the
Okay.
BBA, you've got the seller listing, you've got the purchase and sell. I think you've got it all.
Okay, cool. Mike, what's up?
yeah, okay. I'm writing right now a contract, but I got a couple questions if you want before the land and sale agreement, all right? And I got only 4 questions about it because I cannot move forward because I don't understand too much.
Okay.
But the question is, when I'm running, because it's the first time to write for the land and the sale agreement. The question is, okay, I got only 2 questions. When can be, what's going to be the closing cost amount? I don't know. I don't have idea about it because for the normal sale purchase agreement, I put 1% of the sales price. But for the land,
How much is the price of the land?
it's at 20,000, but I'm gonna put 17,500.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was 1%, the earnest money?
Okay, the earnest money I put only 1,000 because normally I use 1%.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I'd even maybe try for a little less, $500.
Yeah.
See what they say.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, now
Generally speaking, just so you know, guys, generally speaking, earnest money is negotiable, but more often than not, we find it to be close to around 1%. Okay, in an environment like this, we sometimes will see it a little bit higher than 1% because it's so competitive. Okay, with a $20,000 property or a $17,000 property, I wouldn't put like $170. That's probably not enough. And if I'm on the seller side, I want it to be painful enough to prevent the buyer from just leaving and saying, oh, whatever, earnest money, I don't care. If it's $170, I'm like, whatever. If I feel like leaving the deal, I'll leave the deal, right? I think $1,000 is probably close to what it'll end up being, Mike. But if I was the buyer, I think I would just put $500 and see what they say.
Yeah, 500.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta talk to the buyer when I move. At the end of this, I gotta call the buyer to finish it. But I got just it's the first time. I don't know what length time I can put for the closing date for the land.
So what are they? what are they doing with the land? They're just going to sit on it until they can save up enough money to buy?
Yeah, she gonna build LED. I mean, not right now. She needs just to buy the land.
Um, there's a lot that goes into this. I mean, because you want to make sure that it's, you know, that and there's a lot that goes into it. You want to make sure that they know like how big of a house they can build on it. Like, are there any easements? Is there a survey? Is there anything you need to know? Is there any portion of the property that's like in a floodplain? I mean, there's a lot that goes into considering whether this is like, I'll be honest, Mike, it sounds like your buyer's all over the place, right? They were trying to buy a home and now all of a sudden they want to buy a piece of land and sit on it for a while. Something doesn't sound right. You know what I'm saying? Like, if they buy a piece of land and all they have is $20,000 out of their world and a piece of raw land, yet they're still not living where they want to live, right? So it doesn't feel like they've solved their problem. That's why it sounds a little odd to me.
Yeah, but it's the client's decision. I cannot decide because I had a conversation to ask, hey, you got already $20,000. Why not just wait the moment to buy a house? She said, okay, I was hoping to buy the house because they don't want to give me the money, but I need to buy land and I'm going to be myself. I'm going to take, you know, the time to build the house. And, you know, I cannot force the client. The client needs to buy the land. And I called the listing agent. And the listing agent, we used to talk. They say they're waiting for the offer if we need the house. And my client decided, because I insisted too many times to make sure that she need the land. And she decided, she said, I need the land, put the offer. But now I'm writing the offer is the first time. And I know the legal descriptions. I asked the attorney office, they're gonna give me the answer. I will need the price of the silver. They're gonna do the same. But my big question for you is only how much can be, I don't know if you have an idea for the closing costs and the time length.
So the time is going to be primarily dictated by how much due diligence they're trying to do. Like, are they bringing out a construction company? Are they bringing out an architect? Are they doing a survey? Are they testing any of the land for like buildability? Are they checking anything with the county so they know what's possible and what's not possible? So a lot of the, like, a cash closing could literally take barely a week if all they got to do is run the title, right? But most of the time is going to be spent on how much due diligence this person wants to do on the land itself, right? Candace, feel free to chime in if you'd like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for the house, I put 15 days. But for the land, how many days due diligence? And how many, because for the house, I put 1 month before closing. That means you're gonna do 1 month for closing. But for the land, how many days I can put? Due diligence, how many days? And for the closing, how many days? That is the question.
Well, the first contract was a loan, meaning most of the reason why the contract takes a month to close is because of the loan. So all you would have to do on a cash sale is run the title and finish any inspections and get comfortable with that. So if that's all you're waiting for, you could probably close faster than a month. As far as the closing cost, I would reach out to the attorney and ask them to draw that up for you exactly, because it's not going to be much. It's going to be title insurance. It's going to be a title search.
Yeah, they send me this. They send me this.
Yeah.
But,
so
I can't see. I don't understand.
Right. So add up all the costs.
They send me this. But I cannot figure it out. You say I need to add like the title amounts. It's gonna be for the title.
Yeah, you could take a picture of it if you want and send it to me, and I'll see if I can dissect it a little bit. But basically, in a cash sale, you're paying for the title search, you're paying for title insurance. Presumably, they want title insurance, owner's title insurance. And if they don't, they're really missing the boat. They really need to get that. Okay. You're paying for the attorney's time, right? The attorney fee for their time, and you're paying some closing fees. Some like recording fees and that kind of thing. You're not setting up any escrow accounts. you'll that kind of stuff, right? So it's minimal fees. You're probably talking about maybe $1,000, $1,200, something like that. But you should be able to ask the closing attorney to give you more exact number.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you the picture of this because they sent me already the information, but I need to figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Candace, go ahead.
I was going to say, so the most important, not the most important thing, but one of the important things is that we can have our vendor partners help us with preparation, and preparation is key to making an offer. It's just important because you'll get informed and you can help your buyer make an educated and informed decision. So the preparation is important. Closing attorneys help us with all kinds of things. Lenders help us with all kinds of things. So reach out to them.
Perfect. I feel like somebody was about to ask a question.
Well, I just have two questions whenever
Okay.
there's a good spot for it. You mentioned that the offer, that the buyer offer should include the exclusive seller engagement listing agreement.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. How did that come up? Why was that document included in your list?
Oh, because if you want to take listings, then you need to be familiar with that listing.
Got it. Okay, got it. I thought that was part of the offer package. I'm sorry.
No,
One
no,
of the thing too, since we have all these, multiple offers and now we have backup offers, can you just go over the process of submitting a backup offer? I know that there's the exhibit, but do we need to send an entirely new offer since the dates might change? You might submit a backup offer 2 or 3 days later. And can you just go over that process?
Yes. So it's been a little while since I've done a backup offer. So Candace, listen real closely in case I say something incorrectly, please. Here's the way that it would work. The original buyer and seller are going to come to terms. Okay, there's going to be a formally binding agreement, and the buyer is going to be buyer number one is going to be under contract. Okay, then you show up and say, hey, I want to submit an offer, or maybe you were one of the offers that lost.
Well, I was one of the offers that lost, and then the agent said, we'll accept your backup. You'll accept your offer as backup if you'd like.
Okay, so basically either you were the best of all the losers. Were you the best of all the losers, I guess?
According to the agent, yes.
Okay, great. So you would then resubmit your offer. On the second to last page, you would check where you're checking the boxes that say which documents are included.
Yeah.
Then you would check the backup offer addendum, right, and label that. So it's like Exhibit D or whatever.
But it's an entirely new package, though. Is it entirely new package since I'm redoing?
Theoretically, but basically, let me think of how I want to say.
I'm just not sure.
I mean, you're gonna delete the time limit, right? I suppose you could go in and change all the contract dates, but then you're gonna have to change them all for all the contracts.
Do you need to do that? I actually did that. I did a whole brand new thing with adding that backup exhibit. So I put a whole new offer in with the exhibit that this is a backup offer.
Well, you tell them it's a backup offer based on the fact that you have a backup offer addendum or exhibit, and you check in the contract that that's part of the contract.
Okay.
So whether you use the original contract dates or offer date or a different one, I don't think that's so important.
Okay.
Okay. But when they receive it, it needs to be, buttoned up, of course, right? If you say the loan exhibit is B, make it B. I mean, there's nothing more aggravating than you say the loan exhibit's B and then it ends up being labeled C or something. It's like, come on, you're going to be my partner getting this deal to the closing table. Come on.
Got it.
Right. So you submit a normal offer. You check the box that says backup. You include the backup. Okay. And then it gets formally executed. So now you have the sellers under contract with buyer A, or let's call him buyer one, and you are now buyer two. You're in secondary position or backup position. Okay. Basically what happens, there's not necessarily I'm trying to think of the exact language in the backup offer. amendment, which says, Candace, do you typically see that the earnest money is deposited at binding agreement of the backup, or that it's only due when it becomes primary?
Due when it becomes primary.
Okay, I didn't submit it earnest money with the backup offer.
I mean,
I
you've
don't know-
got
I
it
don't
in
know if-
there, but you just don't submit it.
Correct.
Okay, so things are going smoothly. Everything is happening the normal way with the primary offer. Okay, there is a chance that you'll never be notified, and a good chance that you'll never be notified that you've gone into primary position and they close with buyer number one. If that doesn't happen and something goes south with the backup or the primary offer, then you will be notified in writing that says primary offer is has terminated, and you are automatically, this serves as notification that you are now in primary position. And at that moment, all of your clocks start ticking. So now you got to get the home inspector out, you got to turn the earnest money in, you got to make loan application, you got to send all the paperwork to the attorney, do the title work, check with the HOA, all that kind of stuff. Okay. There is some language in the backup exhibit, which basically says, like, if we don't have an answer by this moment, then then the backup offer terminates. I don't really find that to be all that valuable, because if you want to leave the backup offer position, you just leave it, right? So you're not bound to like let that date come and go for you to leave.
And we can rescind that the backup offer at any time.
That's exactly what I mean.
Okay.
Okay, give me 1 second just to make sure I'm. Okay, Mike, just so you understand this. Oh, he left. All right, never mind. I was gonna run down basically the list of what those fees were. Okay, does that make sense,
I'm
John?
good. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, now with respect to the backup offer, there's a couple of nuances that we should chat about. So the first is, if you're on the buyer side, it's somewhat anticlimactic, right? Because it's like, yay, we're under contract yet not in primary position, and now what happens, right? And inevitably what happens is the buyer starts looking at other places, right?
Which is what we did.
Yep. And then your efforts are all wasted, more or less, right? I don't want to sound too negative about it, but that is definitely a risk that you run. Now, you have an ethical issue, potentially, when you start submitting offers on other properties when you know you can't buy both of them. Okay, right? So, like,
But again, I wouldn't suggest it, but you can do it. It's not ethical, but it's not illegal.
well, I think the middle ground there is, let's say I'm under contract, a backup position to buy your house, and Candace lists her house, and I like her house more, or I want to move forward with her house, and I can enter in some negotiations with Candace, and immediately prior to signing the paperwork with Candace, I just terminate the backup offer.
That's okay.
That I think that's toeing the line, but I'd say that's probably okay. The alternative would be to kill the backup offer and then try to go be one of 50 people buying Candace's house, which in this environment I wouldn't recommend, because then you end up with nothing. Right now, if I was a seller or if I was a listing agent, first of all, you do not need to disclose to anybody that there's backups. Like, you wouldn't necessarily call the original buyer and say, hey, we just signed a backup offer. Now, I would consider sharing that information if I found it to be strategic, right? So when they come back and say, hey, we want you to fix these backward electrical outlets, say, no, fix your own outlets, right? And you might say, hey, just so you know, we have a backup offer. We're not going to agree to fix anything, so don't even bother. You don't have to say that, but in the back of your mind, if somebody comes back to you and says, fix all these things, then you can just say no. Now, you can't release yourself as a seller from the contract, but you can make it where the buyer could potentially release themselves. Because remember, the backup offer, if it all happened at the same time, it's probably less desirable than the original offer. So you may agree to fix something small as long as you'll net more money, or just to basically to get it over with. Like we had a backup offer one time, and like we said it was as is, and they came back and they asked us to fix this thing that was like 150 bucks, and my seller was like, whatever, let's just move on. Right? It wasn't that big of a deal. You can share that information with the seller's permission if it is strategic for you, right? But you're under no obligation to do that. Now, if the buyer came in after the fact, right, meaning they were not a loser of the original highest and best, and then they come in and say, well, I'll give you 410 and you're under contract for 400, then you could say to the seller, or you can say to a buyer who might be doing an inspection and getting nervous about backward electrical outlets, hey, I got a better backup. I'm not trying to threaten you, but we're not fixing anything. So if you want to move forward, I'm happy to move forward with you. But if you want to leave, I'm fine with that too. Right? Because I'll just sell the home to somebody else with more money, for more money. So you can decide however you want to be. Now you're not being a jerk. You got to remember, like, you know, there's a lot of agents, but it's still a very small community, right? If you get a reputation for being a jerk, nobody's going to want to do business with you, right? And I've mentioned to you guys several times, I'm sure this is the case with you, Candace, too. Like, at some point, you just build up a ton of relationships. Like, there's a lot of agents who I can see their listing and say, hey, Lee, I see your listing at 123 Hill Street. I want it. My buyer wants it. I'm sure you got 17 offers. However, I want to win. You ready for a slam dunk? Pick me. What do I need to put here? Right? And business just gets to be easier because they know that I'm going to do all my job and I'm going to do as much of their job as they let me do, because I just want to get to the closing table. And every T is going to be crossed and every I is going to be dotted and every disclosure is going to look perfect. And no deadlines are going to be missed. Everything's going to be nice and tight. Nothing's going to be sloppy. I'm only going to work with A+ vendors. You see what I'm saying? Now, if I have a reputation for being sloppy, I don't win. And guess what happens when you don't win? You got to put that buyer right back in the car and go try again. And hope to God that you don't find a home that's listed by somebody you pissed off 3 years ago. What?
Because you won't win that one.
You won't win that one either. And guess what you're going to do then? You're going to put that buyer right back in the car and try again. Was this helpful, guys?
Definitely.
Questions. Where do I find these contracts?
So this is in DocuSign, right? So you go into DocuSign within Command, and then you start an opportunity, and then you drag in your contracts.
Okay. And are these the only contracts I need to learn?
No, but I would say that 90% of the contracts that you will use are listed right here. I would learn these backward and forward, and then I would go find more people to add to your database.
Okay.
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 There's a website called In Command with Sam. That's Sam Jackson's YouTube page, and he's got tons of videos on DocuSign and starting opportunities and all that kind of stuff, so you can navigate around there too. Okay. If you need help, obviously you can reach out to us. Okay.
All right.
All right, guys, we're going to be doing a couple of these
Thanks.
sessions each week. We're going to kind of alternate between contracts and scripts and role play and business planning and all kinds of stuff. So I appreciate you guys being here. Don't forget to check your email to know when your small group is and what time and day it meets. And I'll see you soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye.
So long, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, Bill. Bye, everybody.